What's up, guys? It's KO Picks. This is our very first picks and predictions video where we're going to break down every single fight for UFC Vegas 97 in depth. So yeah, I'm not going to waste much of your time. I'll leave a lot of the random info about the channel to the end, and let's jump right into the first fight we have here. Alright, so the first fight on the card we have is Zygimantas Ramaska versus Nathan Fletcher. Hopefully I didn't butcher Ramaska's name, but yeah, to break this down, this fight was actually booked for UFC Vegas 96 about 2 weeks ago. Now it's been rebooked to UFC Vegas 97, and that's because Fletcher had a little bit of a medical condition, had to pull out. I did some research, found out that it's probably staph infection that Fletcher was dealing with, but I don't think that should play too much of a factor. I think he should be fine, considering they rebooked it just for 2 weeks later. But yeah, to break this fight down, Ramaska is an aggressive striker. He's always going to be moving forward, and he's always going to have high volume and continuously throw strikes throughout the fight. A few bad things, though. He can get chinned, and he can also get taken down. But if he is taken down, he won't just lie there. He will try to work back up. On the other hand, Fletcher also has a lot of forward pressure. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter. He can put in work on the feet and on the ground as well. I would say he's definitely less technical on the feet than Ramaska, but he does have a better chin. And the way I see this fight going is that both fighters are going to want to pressure forward. Both fighters will be landing. I think that Fletcher can take a shot better than Ramaska can, and that's going to help him because he's going to win that pressure battle. And I think once Ramaska is hurt, Fletcher can definitely mix in a ton of wrestling and spend some of this fight with Ramaska on his back. So yeah, there's also been a little bit of a line shift as well. Fletcher was minus 180 or 175 for UFC Vegas 96. Now that it's been rebooked, Fletcher's line has moved to about minus 135. So there is a little bit of concern because of the staff, but I do think that Fletcher has a skill set to get it done. It will probably come down to that pressure battle and who wins and who can pressure forward and which fighter will have to take a step back. And I think Fletcher should win that because he can just take a shot better than Ramaska. So I think Fletcher gets it done. All right, up the card. The next fight we have is Andrade Petroski versus Dylan Budka. Both of these fighters do have a wrestling base. Petroski is a minus 300 favorite, and I can kind of understand why. So on the feet, both of these guys are not great strikers, but Budka basically has no hands. Petroski does have some power in his hands, so when he's throwing, there will be some intent behind it. I don't see Budka wanting to just keep this fight on the feet. I think both of them are going to look to wrestle. Now, I think Petroski is the overall better grappler in this matchup as well. He's definitely more dangerous in the grappling. Budka will look for takedowns and then be looking for control after that. I think he's a kind of like a pressure wrestler, while I think Petroski overall will be more dangerous, has a chance to look for a submission, and also has the better gas tank. We saw Budka gas out in the second round against Cesar Almeida in his last performance, and we saw Petroski in his last performance wrestle to a unanimous decision. So I do think that Petroski has a skill set on both the feet, the ground, and overall with the gas tank to win this fight. All right, so the third fight on the card is Jaqueline Amorim versus Vanessa Demopoulos. I'm going to be super biased for this breakdown. I fucking hate Vanessa Demopoulos. She's busted so many of my parlays over her last two fights, and I truly believe that she lost them both, even though she did get the nod on the scorecards both times. For context, 2 fights ago, she beat Kanako Marotte, and Marotte had gone into that decision as a minus 4,000 favorite on the sportsbooks. And then in her last fight, she won a split decision against Emily Ducat, where I also think Ducat won that fight. Now, I actually hate this bitch. I'm pretty confident that she gives 2 out of 3 judges head before her fight to make sure that she locks in the win. There's definitely some bullshit going on here with Vanessa Demopoulos. So I'm going to fade her again like I faded her the last 2 times. I've been getting burned, but I'm going to continue to fade her till she loses. So my pick will be Jaqueline Amorim, regardless of the breakdown. But once again, Amorim is the favorite in this fight. Demopoulos is about a plus 200 dog. And Jaqueline Amorim is a really dangerous grappler. She's a jiu-jitsu champion with okay takedowns and also has a 9-inch reach advantage in this fight. So she can definitely put in some work on the feet. And Demopoulos is a very straightforward fighter. She's going to come forward. She's going to want to box in range, dirty box throughout the fight. And the reason why I like Amorim is because Vanessa Demopoulos was taken down and controlled by Kanako Marotte quite a bit in that fight 2 fights ago. So I definitely think that Amorim can get the takedowns here. And then on the ground, I think Amorim is super live to get a finish. So give me Amorim by submission. Fuck this bitch Vanessa Demopoulos, and I hope she loses. All right, up the card in fight 4, we have Gabriel Santos versus Yizha. Now, Yizha is looking like a pretty popular underdog to pick on this card, but I'm actually going to stick with the favorite and think Gabriel Santos does get this done. Both of these guys are pretty high-level grapplers, so it does come down to who's going to shoot first, since both these guys can get the takedown on the other. Gabriel Santos is super aggressive. When he goes for takedowns, he throws big looping shots to push you up against the fence and then go in for the takedown. I do think he's going to become super aggressive and make sure that he shoots first on Yizha and put Yizha on the defensive quite early on in this fight. Both of these fighters will also look for submissions on the ground and be fairly aggressive there. And I think that Yizha won't get the better of Gabriel Santos in a lot of scramble situations. When it comes to resume, Gabriel Santos also just has fought the much higher caliber of fighters. His UFC debut was a split decision loss to Lerone Murphy, who's super legit, and then David Onama was his last loss, who I also think is really good. While Yizha does have some decent fights on the regional scene, I don't think he's fought the fighters that Gabriel Santos has fought, at least at that level, and I think that Gabriel Santos can get the win on Yizha and get his first win in the UFC. Up the card, we have Andre Lima versus Felipe dos Santos. This is going to be my first underdog pick. I'm going to pick Felipe dos Santos at plus 150 to win this fight. Last week, this was a pick'em, but now it's drifted, and Andre Lima is a minus 180 favorite. I can kind of understand the line, but Andre Lima is not as good as I think a lot of people think he is. He was losing to Severino before he got bit, and then he beat Mitch Raposo, but it's fucking Mitch Raposo. I don't really think that's a high-level win by any means. Felipe dos Santos made his UFC debut against Manel Kape. He did lose that fight, but he did do a lot of good work on the feet against Manel Kape. And then he won a split decision in his last fight versus Victor Altamirano. That fight was at elevation, and they were pretty gassed by the end of it. I think Felipe dos Santos does gas a little bit at the end of his fights in general, but he is a shoot box fighter. He's going to be super aggressive in the striking. You could say Andre Lima is the more technical and probably just the overall better striker, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think Felipe dos Santos' pressure and aggression is going to get to Lima. People who think Lima can kind of dance around and point fight Felipe dos Santos, I think that's bullshit. I don't think that's going to happen. Felipe dos Santos also doesn't have the best takedowns, but he does have good jiu-jitsu. But I don't see Andre Lima shooting for a takedown. I think Andre Lima will want the fight on the feet, but I think that's going to be his demise because I think Felipe dos Santos' forward pressure is going to get to him. I think Felipe dos Santos is going to be super aggressive, pick up rounds 1 and 2, and probably get a 29-28 decision win against Andre Lima this weekend. All right, the next fight on the card is Isaac Dulgarian versus Brendon Marotte. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Isaac Dulgarian is minus 1,800, and he's going to win this fight. He's going to be the pick. He's going to take Brendon Marotte down. He's going to beat him up on the ground and probably get a finish in round 1 here. Isaac Dulgarian is a really nasty wrestler. Marotte's decent on the feet. Nothing special on the ground. He's kind of trash. And I think Isaac Dulgarian, as long as he focuses on his cardio, I think can be a really, really big problem in the featherweight division. He destroyed Francis Marshall in round 1. He lost a split decision to C-Rod, but that decision was absolute bullshit. He 10-8'd C-Rod in round 1. And round 2, I mean, you could go rewatch that fight. I don't see many people I know scoring round 2 for C-Rod, but they scored round 2 for C-Rod. And then Isaac Dulgarian did death gas in round 3 and then get 10-8'd in round 3. Ended up losing that as a split decision, but I think that's the most bullshit decision I've ever seen in my life. Isaac Dulgarian should be 7-0, and he definitely wins this weekend. Minus 1,800, no real play to bet there. So yeah, Isaac Dulgarian is the pick. All right, the next fight on the card we have is OSP versus Ryan Spann. Now, this fight is going to be ass. Both of these guys are trash. OSP is 41. He's coming off that big upset win at plus 400 against Kennedy Nzechukwu. And Ryan Spann is riding a 3-fight loss streak to Krylov, Anthony Smith, and then Bogdan Guskov. But to be honest, OSP is 41. His chin is shot. We know what we're going to get with OSP. He's a low-volume striker. He'll wrestle if it presents itself, but he's not really going to look for any wrestling. Same thing with Ryan Spann. Ryan Spann has power on the feet, but he is slow. He's probably not going to look to wrestle either. Both of these guys, like I said, are pretty low volume, but OSP's chin is shot, and I think Ryan Spann gets it done by KO. Overall, not really looking forward to this. I think this is a pretty trash matchup. All right, up the card in the 8th fight, which is also the start of the main card, we have Rongzhu versus Chris Padilla. Now, Rongzhu used to be in the UFC, and then he got released. He then went back through Road to UFC to kind of claw his way back in. So he's definitely a dog mentally. And Chris Padilla took his UFC debut on short notice against James Zygimantas. He was a plus 340 underdog, but he ended up getting the submission in round 1 through a rear naked choke. Now, my mind does tell me that Rongzhu wins this fight. Rongzhu is definitely going to be more effective on the feet than Chris Padilla. I do see him landing the bigger shots, but I think Chris Padilla is one of those fighters that's hard to put out, so I don't see Rongzhu getting the KO in this matchup. So technically, you could say that Rongzhu can punch Chris Padilla to a decision, but even though my mind tells me that, I'm going to go out on a limb and take Chris Padilla as my pick. He's a plus 230 dog, and the thing is, I think Chris Padilla can get a bunch of takedowns in this fight, but he does not have good control, so I do see Rongzhu popping back up. But I think Chris Padilla is a very timely grappler. I think he can snatch up a submission in the scrambles that are created when Rongzhu tries to pop back up. I think that's what's going to be the difference maker in this fight. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Chris Padilla wins this by submission. But to be honest, Rongzhu is probably the safer pick here. But yeah, I'm going to take Chris Padilla to win this fight. All right, up the card, the next fight we have is Trevor Peek versus Yanal Ashmouz. Now, this fight is an absolute banger. Everybody loves watching Trevor Peek fight. He might be the most aggressive fighter on the roster. And while Yanal Ashmouz is going to be the more technical fighter in this matchup, who does have a very well-rounded skill set, with Trevor Peek's level of aggression, anything can happen. Now, this fight is basically a pick'em. You do get paid a little bit more on the Ashmouz side. He is minus 102. And I am going to pick Ashmouz to win here. I think he is the better fighter. But like I said, with Trevor Peek constantly trying to take his opponent's head off, anything can happen. But what I do see happening in this fight is that Yanal Ashmouz might struggle a little bit early on, getting his footing against someone like Trevor Peek. But I think over 3 rounds, he can definitely take over, especially middle to later on in the fight. And I think his well-rounded skill set can get him the win against Trevor Peek. So I'm going to pick Ashmouz. I think he's definitely the more skilled fighter. The more skilled fighter doesn't necessarily always win, but I like the line. I do like Ashmouz, and I pick him to win this fight. All right, so the next one on the card is Matt Schnell versus Alessandro Costa. Now, this one's a pretty easy one. I think Costa should win this fight. He's minus 500 on the sports books, and Matt Schnell has just taken so much damage throughout his career that I just don't think he can take much more. He got knocked out by Steve Erceg in his last fight, and fuck Steve Erceg. I had him versus Kai Kara-France, and he absolutely let me down. So fuck Matt Schnell too. I don't know why, but I would just say that as well. Alessandro Costa should be able to get the KO here. This fight should not go to the ground for any reason. Both these guys should keep it standing, keep it on the feet. And Alessandro Costa has a better striking differential, and he just has more power and has a better chin at this point. He is really durable himself as well. So look for Alessandro Costa by KO. That line hasn't dropped yet, at least not on DraftKings. But when it does, that's probably a pretty good prop to pick up. All right, further up the main card, we have Kyle Nelson versus Steve Garcia. Now, this is a pretty interesting matchup. People can say Kyle Nelson is pretty ass, and I do agree, like, he's not that great, but recently he has been performing pretty well. He beat Blake Bilder as an underdog, then he beat Fernando Padilla as an underdog, then he knocked out Bill Algeo as an underdog, and he's been putting it together recently. So I wouldn't count Kyle Nelson out, but Steve Garcia has been on an absolute tear as well. After he got knocked out in the Mahashate fight, he's been on a 4-fight knockout streak himself. And I just think that Steve Garcia is a pretty big power puncher. He has what it takes in his hands to get the finish here. Kyle Nelson is doing pretty well, though, so it's kind of hard to assess how good Kyle Nelson is because he's been making pretty big improvements in the gym. So I'm going to pick Steve Garcia. I do think that Kyle Nelson, in a fight against someone with power like Steve Garcia, will want to wrestle, but I don't think it's easy to wrestle Steve Garcia. I think this fight's going to stay upright for the most part, and I think that Steve Garcia can definitely catch Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson will have to make up some reach disadvantage in this fight as well. I don't think it's too massive, but there is a 3 to 4 inch reach advantage for Steve Garcia. So Kyle Nelson will have to break that and come in. So I do see Steve Garcia winning, but I do think this is actually a pretty tricky fight to break down. I wouldn't be surprised in whichever way this goes. I also wouldn't be surprised if Steve Garcia gets a little bit over aggressive. He is on that big win streak of knockouts. But then again, I also wouldn't be surprised if he just knocks out Kyle Nelson as well. Kyle Nelson has been chinned before. So We'll see what happens. I'm going to pick Steve Garcia, but I'm pretty curious to see how this fight plays out. All right, now the next fight on the card is the co-main event, and it's two of Dana White's side bitches. It's Jessica Andrade versus Natalia Silva. Now, I'm going to pick Natalia Silva. She's a minus 300 favorite, and I do think she gets this done. Andrade is a perennial contender, and she's great, but I do think that Natalia Silva does have the skill set to get the win here. Now, Andrade is going to be more physically dominant in this fight. She might win some minutes, clinching Natalia Silva up against the cage and winning kind of control time there. But Natalia Silva does have a 90% takedown defense. She is going to be able to stay upright against Jessica Andrade. And then in open space, it's all Silva. She has a great striking differential. She has great kickboxing. She knows how to not get hit, and she knows how to land herself. So I do think that in open space, Natalia Silva is going to be able to pick this fight apart. And for the little bit that Andrade does physically dominate her, I do think she'll be able to pop out and stay in space and get the win here. All right, now our main event, which is Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady. Now give me Gilbert Durino Burns to beat Sean Brady in this fight. Maybe I've convinced myself of this a little bit because I do really like Gilbert Burns. And you could say that the easiest path to victory here is for Sean Brady through control time, through some dominance on the ground, but I don't see that happening. Now, Sean Brady did dominate Kelvin Gastelum in his win, but Kelvin Gastelum is pretty trash. And I think that Gilbert Burns won't be getting dominated on the ground like that. Maybe Sean Brady does get some takedowns later on as some fatigue sets in, but I don't see him getting takedowns early. I think Gilbert Burns can keep this fight standing. I think he has an advantage on the feet, maybe just a slight one, but I definitely think that he can outstrike Sean Brady, do more damage on the feet, and win that battle. So, you know what? Give me Gilbert Burns to do this, likely by decision. I think they're too high level for any submissions to happen. And maybe Gilbert Burns can, crack him on the feet and get a KO. But I think the likely outcome here is Gilbert Burns by decision. So that's what I'm going to go with. All right, guys. So that is all the picks and predictions for the UFC Vegas 97 card that is on September 7th. A little bit of quick info on the channel. So we normally drop all our picks and predictions in short form format as well. This was kind of our first long form video where we break it down a little bit further. We also do have a Discord. We'd love when people join the Discord, so please join up on the Discord. It's free. You can come in there and ask us any questions, chat with us. We are really open to discussion on any of the picks, any of the fights. So yeah, join up on the Discord. And then we also do drop 2 free bets in short form on the YouTube channel every week for every single card. And if you're in the Discord as well, because I know people probably miss some shorts sometimes, if you are in the Discord, we'll drop the picks in there as well. So join the Discord to not miss that. And then finally, if you do want to join Premium, we do have a website called kopicks.win. And for $20 a month, you can get access to our entire bet slip for each card. But nonetheless, we just love to have everyone in our community. So please join up on the Discord. And yeah, stay tuned for more picks and predictions and content.